Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Welcome back to St. Catherine of Siena in Houston, the 5th Sunday of Easter. The first passage from the Acts of the Apostles reminds us that the early Christians are like us, not perfect. Do you remember the passage from the Acts of the Apostles that was read, proclaimed the Sunday after Easter Sunday, where it stated that the Christian community was built upon the 4 pillars of the communion, the fellowship, meaning being with one another, united in faith, were of one mind. They distributed their goods, they held them in common, and they celebrated the breaking of the bread, which is St. Luke's description of what we call Mass, or the celebration of the Eucharist. Those were the mainstays of the faith community. It was spiritual, it was practical, it was charitable. Now, in today's passage, you're going to see all was not well in paradise. The Hellenists and the Hebrews are both Jewish communities. The Hellenists are those who spoke Greek and probably came from outside of what was then known as Palestine. The Hebrews were the people of the Jews of Jerusalem and Palestine who basically spoke Aramaic or Hebrew and maybe some Greek, but predominantly Aramaic and Hebrew. And they, we are told from the Acts of the Apostles, still worshipped by going to the temple on the Sabbath. Those things were important to them. When those who came for Pentecost from the Mediterranean basin, the diaspora, from outside of Palestine, they did not have the same tie to temple worship that the local Palestinian Jews did. So there was a cultural difference, and they probably may well have been culturally broader, more diverse, living in the Roman Greek Empire. The Hebrews were the local townspeople, not living in a broader, bigger world. An issue arises when it states that the widows of the Jews from the Greek world were being neglected. What happened to the holding of everything in common and nobody was in need? There are 2 possibilities that brought this about. The Jews of Palestine may well have been using their sway to force the Greek-speaking Jews from outside of Palestine to conform to temple worship and so on. And it may well have been either you do as we do or you leave. So again, the keeping of the communion and the community is a vital aspect of Christianity. Always has been. Sometimes we achieve it and we keep this communion, sometimes we do not. Interestingly, note what the apostles do. They do not make the decision. They actually ask the Greek-speaking Jews, the Hellenists, choose leaders from your own community, have them organize it according to their ability and so on. We're not going to do it for you. Does that remind you of something that goes on at home these days? Do it for me. Or as a priest, I've often come across meetings where somebody will say, well, we need this, this, and this. And I've learned over the years to say, very good, you're going to be the first volunteer. And they almost normally faint and do their best to walk out the door before we have a chance to sign them up. You want something, it should be done. The wise person would say, okay, it's yours, we'll help you, we'll be there. So the apostles do not take administrative responsibility for something others are quite capable of doing. It's an intriguing working out of a dilemma, and also it keeps the community together, each to their own. It keeps it diverse, multicultural. That's a challenge for the church no matter where we are. Sometimes it's age difference, how it used to be in God's old days, and so on. So read that letter, or the passage, it has inordinate practical application for the world in which we live. The letter attributed to Peter, 1 Peter, speaks about the cornerstone. The cornerstone is of a different angle and cut to the mainstay of the wall. So it's unique in comparison. It's different. Point being, people who are different, do you know of anybody who is not, are equally welcome, or should be, in the community of the believers. In fact, the passage states that like Christ, who is the cornerstone of the building, it keeps it together at a place that could be very weakened when the wall has to bend and turn. Without that cornerstone, the wall will collapse. The people we think are dispensable, we are reminded, are indispensable. And maybe from a very practical point of view, they challenge us to be better people ourselves. And they challenge our biases, our bigotries, our narrow-mindedness, our self-righteousness. Please fill in the rest of the list. You know where I'm going with that one. The gospel. Good old Thomas, one of all our favourites. Again, practical Thomas. When Jesus, the passage is taken from the Last Supper in John's Gospel, where Jesus is preparing them for his departure and he is reminding them of what he has told them, that he will go, a time will come when he will leave, there will be a departure, but the departure is not what they expect. And the place to where he is going, they are not too sure. Think for a second of many people whose parent, sibling had to leave home and country so that those who stayed behind would have the wherewithal to live a more dignified life. They immigrate, they go abroad, they work by the sweat of their brow, they send back what they can to elderly parents, to extended family, to whomever. These are very practical things. Enter into it from the perspective of, and some of you probably have experienced this, and you most certainly know of people who have, where children, siblings, have to face the reality that a major person, a key person in the household is leaving. Will we see you again? Will you return? Will you get to the destination you hope to arrive at? All these things are part of the emotion of the gospel. Read it from that perspective, talk about it as usual, and we'll gather together again. Please do not hit the fast forward button. Press pause. Just reread them, look at them. And when you're rereading this first letter of St. Peter, when you think and are listening to the person who was rejected becoming the keystone and an invaluable part of the building, which is, of course, the new temple built of people, not stone, the household of God, think of yourself. You are a key component in the household of God. Now, some may have told you you are not, you cannot, you should not. Let the scriptures speak to you. You're a big boy and girl now. Let the word of God speak to you. Others may have twisted it. You might not agree with what I say. I think that's good, by the way. It means you're thinking. You have a mind of your own. I encourage it. But think of yourself as maybe the stone that has been left aside, cast aside, not looked at, abandoned, and so on. Okay, you have plenty to talk about. Now please press the pause button. Thank you. Have you ever asked a child, your own or someone else, where is heaven? In general, what has the response been? My experience has been that 9 times or 99.9 times a child will say, up there. And I remember years ago asking children or trying to get them to realize that heaven, the domain of God, is not up there, it's down here. The gospel is literally asking the same question. When Jesus reminds his disciples prior to his departure, which will be through the crucifixion, and returning to the glory he had with the Father prior to coming among us. The disciples at the table, not apostles, disciples, men and women, are worried that their guiding light, their leader, their supporter, their comforter will be gone, and it's pending. How will they survive without this person? The coronavirus brings up the same issues of, sudden death, unexpected, and death is often unexpected and sudden and cruel, and trying to find one's bearings again. The gospel is picking up that human experience. And Jesus is trying to console his disciples and say that where he is going, not up there, but returning to the glory he had with the Father, that he will come back again, and that he will take his disciples to that place that is prepared for them. Now, for years I always understood that he will come back again and take us, that we may be with him where he is, refers to after death, which is a comforting and correct thought, but it's not the primary thought and concern in the passage in today's gospel. The concern is Jesus has been preparing a place in the presence of the Father, the same presence that he lives in consistently himself. The passage says there are many dwelling places, or it translates there are many rooms in my Father's mansion. A more archaic expression, I think, helps us better. There are many abiding places. The beginning of the Gospel, towards the end of chapter 1, when John the Baptist states to John the Baptist's disciples and followers, "Behold the Lamb of God," looking at Jesus, he points him out. Some of the disciples follow Jesus. Jesus turns around and asks them, "What are you seeking?" And their question is, "Where are you staying?" Menain, where are you abiding? Where is your home? Where do you live? From the prologue in John's Gospel, we are told the home of Christ is in the bosom of God. Now, the bosom of God is the same as Lazarus and the rich man. When Lazarus died, the rich man looked up from Hades, the realm of the dead, and saw Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham, lying on his bosom. It is the place of honour at a banquet. The beloved disciple in John's Gospel is described as at the bosom of Christ at the table, meaning he had the place of honour. Jesus always had the place of honour in the presence of God. He's offering us the same place. Where I am, that you would be also. The place of honour is, and the Synoptic Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, show us the same idea from different perspectives. Most of the table scenes, nearly all of them, Jesus dines with people that we ordinarily would not. It sometimes causes scandal, and it did cause scandal. Actually, that's the passage in 1 Peter where the stone that was rejected, the people who are rejected become stumbling blocks. A stumbling block in Greek is scandalon. We trip over it. It causes us to fall flat on our face. We don't necessarily see it coming. We're not paying attention. That's what scandal is. Scandalon, a stumbling block. when other people become that which we trip over and lose sight of the one who is calling us to dine at a table in the household of God, the place where the places that have been prepared for us since the foundation of the world. By the way, that's a comment from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, the end of the Last Judgment scene. These comments appear and reappear. They come in from the left, from the right. It is, as Raymond E. Brown, a commentator, a famed one on John's Gospel, stated, the scriptures say the same thing from different sides. He said it's like picking up a well-cut gem or stone. You put it up to the light and you turn it. You see it differently. It casts a different aspect, and we see it in a way we never saw it before. All the Gospels together, the fourfold Gospel, is reminding us and get us to look at things from a different angle so that we can perceive and see them better. 1 Peter in the readings this Sunday remind us, be careful of those we reject or allow ourselves to be rejected, or consider ourselves or others as not loved by God, as not having a place at the banquet in the heavenly kingdom, which begins now. That's why in a church community, welcome, hospitality is one of the primary ministries of the community, of which the priest is part. The welcome is extended. How many of you have gone into a church and felt, oh, I don't really feel welcome here. They don't even look at me. They don't even greet me. Now, I know at the moment we will not be greeting one another, but that's temporary and for good reason. That's for the health and sake and future of every single one of us. There are many dwelling places. They have been prepared. The invitation that Jesus offered the disciples who were curious about where he came from, meaning the bosom of God, the eternal dwelling of Christ, who is God. He is taking us there in the present. That is experienced in the communities where we feel, however awkward, sharp-angled, not so well-rounded, you know, the cornerstone, we still have a place. And it's beholden on all of us who have sharp angles, round corners, odd shapes, psychologically and emotionally. We can actually fit in. That's what the gospel is stating. And if we, and when we get to the stage of accepting the love that Jesus portrays and reveals, hence the way to God, he is the way, he is the revealer of who God truly is. Hence he says, I am the way, the truth. The truth is the truth of who God is. Who is God? How does God see me? How does God behold me? It's an invitation. Do you want, or hopefully you do, take your place at the table? At God's table, in the church, there are no place cards. There are no seats for the privileged. There are no seats for the well-accomplished. There shouldn't be. There are no seats for anybody except for those who come. Everybody has a place of honour at the table in the household of God. In the extension of this life, through and beyond death, we enter it knowing we have already partaken of the banquet where we feel at home. A place at the table, honoured by God, and the title given by Jesus is My Beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. For those of us who listen and follow Christ to God, now we become the ones who are the beloved, the honoured daughter and son of God. The disciples followed Jesus, and when they asked, where do you live? Where is your abode? He said, come and see. It's the same today. An extension of this invitation to come and see would be also extend that welcome to others. This weekend is Mother's Day. It will be a traumatic one at various levels for grandmothers particularly, who are physically distanced from their children. And for those of you who are much younger than me and your grandparents, texting is great in the younger generation. If I receive a text, it's a sort of a postcard, and it's, well, hello, how are you? Don't call me, I'll call you. It is as if I don't want to speak to you. If you were to speak for the same length of time that you text somebody, a human voice is far nicer. Secondly, if you were to spend the amount of time that you text at the table with your family, if you were to do that in speech, you would instantly know it's colossally rude. Have the people at the table disappeared? Are they non-entities? Live in reality rather than virtual reality. It's the same in the gospel. We're called to a relationship with Christ, which is not just spiritual and virtual, it is real, it's flesh and blood. It is the community of believers. Another way of extending this, there is a place in the household of God. This Tuesday, which is the 12th, is International Nurses Day. Extend your care, your respect, your greetings, your responsible physical distancing to healthcare workers, shop attendants, checkout clerks, those who watch our cars when we run into shop, the police, firefighters, caregivers, shelf stockers, the list goes on. These are often the unseen and very often, sadly, disrespected people. Look at the gospel. I know I am a beloved son or daughter of God to the extent I see others as beloved sons and daughters of God, however challenging it may be. You want to know where God is, where God lives, where is this place where there is a seat reserved for me at the table? Come and see. Extend it, accept it. It's an invitation. Happy Mother's Day, happy Nurses Day, happy Caregivers Day, happy day. See you next week. Thank you.